Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Alex Hobson, joined by my fellow hockey writers colleague who covers the Maple Leafs, Shane Seney. Peter Berrettini is not able to join us today. He's working Hall of Fame weekend at the Hockey Hall of Fame, so he's definitely up to some more exciting stuff than we are. Shane, before we get into things, obviously you took a break from your master chef over there to join us on the pod. How's it going?
Things are well. Dinner was good. We just kind of renovated the living room to get the Christmas tree up. So I had a little makeshift podcast studio here. So don't mind the decor. But no, looking forward to today's episode. I don't know how we didn't get invited to the Hall of Fame, but that's a story for another day. But no, happy to be here. And yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, I mean, you have the THW decor set up perfectly and conveniently in the background. That's you love to see that. So. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll kick things off with we've missed a lot because we didn't get around to recording last week. So obviously a lot has gone on in the past 2 weeks. The Leafs followed up probably their worst stretch of the season with their two best games of the season. They took down two of the best teams in the East, and Bruins and the Hurricanes over that back-to-back. And then, you know, they decent effort against Vegas, I would say, just a matter of some poor giveaways at bad times. And, you know, just a not great goaltending in the end. Game against Pittsburgh obviously wasn't fun. And then game against Vancouver looked like it wasn't going to be fun. And then Jordy Ben said, you know what, this is not going to fly. And he just single-handedly changed the pace of the game. So I guess the first thing that we're going to start off with, and this sort of ties into just the past couple of games in general. Sheldon Keefe has looked to finally split Matthews and Marner. The only time we ever saw those two split at all this season was in the third period of that Boston game when they needed a jolt, and it obviously worked, but then they went right back to Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander. They went for Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, Marner into the Vancouver game on Saturday. They ended up winning that game, obviously, and looking at the lines from practice today, and we're recording this on Monday, the 14th. So looking at the lines from practice today, they are still split, which I mean, I've got my own take on this, but Shane, I guess we'll start with you. What do you make of the split, and how do you think it'll impact games going forward?
I'm kind of the side that doesn't think it's a huge deal. They're, you know, elite players, they're skilled players, and if you ask them, they probably don't care. Like, they don't have a preference on who they play with. They just want to produce. So I'm happy with it. Like, Nylander and Matthews look awesome together. They always have. I think that the play where Ben scored the go-ahead goal there, it was all Nylander and Matthews for like the first, 30 seconds of that play. And they're fun to watch. Those two have insane chemistry, and they're almost on the same level, I would say, as Marner and Matthews. So I think it's good. I'm a little bit more concerned about Kerfoot and Bunting on the wings there. Those guys, like Kerfoot's hard, I don't think he's scored in like a month. So it's tough when you got, those skilled guys who you got those duos on both lines, but then you're kind of just right now filling it with, not necessarily the best options. So I'm expecting to kind of look at maybe if we can get a little more out of those two guys and see what happens. And maybe the switching up will even, benefit those guys more than Tavares and Matthews themselves. So again, I'm not, I'm not making a huge deal of it. I'm a little bit more concerned about left wing on both of those lines. So, and if you ask Matthews and Tavares, I think they'd be happy with either or. So to me, it's not a huge deal.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Kerfoot and Bunting on the left side, because I think that's one thing that kind of gets swept under the rug when it comes to analyzing the struggles that come out of the top six. Michael Bunting, obviously last year, 63-point player. He scored 20 goals. He was a mainstay on that top line all season. And even Alex Kerfoot, for as much heat as he takes, he had 51 points last year. And sure, most of those are secondary assists, but he did produce a lot of 5-on-5. So he was producing last year, and that's been one of the biggest differences this year. So far, Alex Kerfoot only has 5 points in 16 games. And I want to say Bunting only has he has 6 points in 16 games. So neither of those players have really been, holding up their end of the bargain so far this year. Personally, when it comes to the Matthews and Marner switch, I was a big fan of when they finally split Matthews and Marner, and you had Nylander and Matthews on the top line and Tavares and Marner. And I agree with you in the sense that in hindsight, it's not really that big of a deal because we're talking about a 60 goal scorer, 100-point player, and two more 30+ goal scorers and 70+ point guys. And reality is when you mix those guys up, any combination you get out of those two guys, or those four guys rather, is going to give you offense. I think the main thing for me was just the fact that it almost seems stubborn to the point where Keefe wouldn't do anything.
Right.
He would not switch Matthews and Marner and Tavares and Nylander under any circumstance. And truth be told, that was the reason that I think so many fans were soured over Mike Babcock towards the end of his tenure, because it was the same with him, except the other way around. He would never split up Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, Marner. And I think all we want to see is just the willingness to spice things up and change things up if it's not working out. And for Matthews and Marner, for as elite as they can be together, we saw it on display all last season. When those two guys are flat, it's not a pretty sight. So I think that the switch was much needed. And you're right, Matthews and Nylander have great chemistry. Tavares and Marner, we all remember the start to the season that Marner had last year. And that was largely fixed because Sheldon Keefe swapped things up and he put Marner with Tavares. And that ended up kind of sparking him and getting him on the right track. So I agree with you. I definitely want to see more out of Kerfoot and Bunting. I'm honestly, I don't really understand why Nick Robertson hasn't been given a proper 10-game, proper 10-game stretch on that second line or something like that. And, we've talked about this in the past. Nick Robertson is a guy that if you're going to play him in the NHL, you have to play him in a role with offensive players where he's going to succeed. And he looked good off the top, but then he didn't have a great game. He got scratched. He comes back into the lineup. He's all of a sudden playing with Yarncroke and Kerfoot or Yarncroke and Engvall and just different combinations of players. And when you're getting less ice time and you're playing with players that bring less offense, you're not going to be getting the best version of Robertson as you can. So I guess we can kind of tie that into this point. I mean, what do you make of Nick Robertson's deployment so far, and what should they do going forward? Because looking at the practice lines from today, it looks like Robertson's going to be a scratch against Pittsburgh tomorrow.
Yeah, it's brutal. I think Drake wrote a song called Trust Issues. It sounds like Sheldon Keefe's heard that one. So it seems like he just has no trust in the kid. And I get it at times. Like there is times where he looks like a little smallish, easily pushed off the puck. He battles, but I think he's just got to get a little bit more smarter on where to really get aggressive and use his skill and his speed to try and like pounce on pucks. I think he just kind of overexerts himself when really he shouldn't be. But that being said, like, how come I just don't understand how his development and giving him a shot over somebody like Pierre Engvall, where it's just like you can't find a place for the guy. I don't know how that's prioritized organizationally, but to me, it doesn't make sense. So I would, I think Robertson is kind of getting a tough go of it of late. I think that he should be in the lineup as a regular. And even if it's not in the top 6, like just put him in a spot where he knows he's going to play. Like he knows, okay, I'm going to play tonight, third line, left wing, here are my two guys. Let's build some chemistry and let's try and build something. Like we've seen that fourth line, if you want to call it the fourth line, with Kampf, Malgin and Aston Reese. Those guys aren't going anywhere. Those three look good together. They've played together for a little bit, and that's, that makes a huge difference. So especially when you're a depth forward and you don't really know where you fit in the lineup, knowing that you're going to be playing with two guys and you can build some chemistry, like that goes a long way. So yeah, I don't know. And the fact is, like we just talked about it, Bunting and Kerfoot aren't doing much. Like they're hardly producing anything. So really, like that's, to me, it's like, why not give the kid a shot? Even throw him with Nylander and Matthews for a couple games just to boost his confidence and see what happens. I don't know if that's the recipe for success, but having Nick Robertson in a suit eating popcorn during the games is not where he should be. That's for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's just, and the part that gets me the most is the fact that if Kerfoot and Bunting were both, or even one of them, if even one of those players were producing this year and stepping up where the team needs them to, I think it'd be a little easier to stomach. Like, okay, there's really not an opportunity in the top 6.
Right.
But if I recall correctly, I think Robertson may have, I just got to verify this. Robertson has as many points as Kerfoot in 6 less games, and he's got 1 less point than Bunting right now. So
more goals too.
Yeah, honestly. And you stick him up in on that second line with Tavares and Marner. And, you know, I would agree with seeing him with Matthews and Nylander. I think that could be a lot of fun as a line, but I think he'd fit better on that Tavares and Marner line because Tavares is a good net front guy. Marner's your passer. Robertson, that'll allow him to be the shooter, the primary shooter on that line. And I don't know. I mean, it looked great in the first game that he played against Dallas. Granted, Nylander was on that line, but either way, I'd like to see Keefe give him more of a shot in the top 6 because as of right now, the alternative really is not working that much. So moving on, a further update. It looks like we are going to be seeing the return of Matt Murray to the crease on Tuesday. He's going to be suiting up to face his former team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I mean, we can't really say that now, actually, because last time, obviously, he tweaked his groin in the practice in the morning skate ahead of what would have been his second game. So as of right now, can't say for sure that he's going to start, but assuming he gets through practice and warm-ups fine, then he will be in the crease. Shane, how big is it for the Maple Leafs right now? We've been running Eric Källgren into the ground for about 2 weeks now. How big is it for Matt Murray to return to the crease and, whether or not he does well, just to get the crease some stability and get them a veteran in there that they actually know that they can trust to give them game after game after game. And I know it sounds silly to say that considering his injury history, but as of right now, Källgren is an AHL goalie and he shouldn't have been given the workload that he's had already. So at the very least, you're getting a guy who can handle playing NHL games consecutive in a row. So what do you think of the return of Murray and what are you expecting from him?
I mean, talk about storyline. It's the Matt Murray revenge game tomorrow. So it's kind of cool that he's coming back that way. It's just extra motivation, I'm sure, but he's been chomping at the bit to get in the lineup. And for me, it's just going to be looking at, how's his mobility? How's his side to side? How is he with those second, third chances where he's got to get up, down, and, be quick on his feet. It's, to me, he's got to get a stretch of 10 games and whatever out of 14 maybe, or 10 out of 12, and just get on a roll and see what he is and what the Leafs have in him. I mean, you look and Samsonov's out and it looks like he won't be out long term, which is great. So that should push him a little bit too. But Källgren's he's been decent. He's done what he's needed to do. He's not a flashy goalie. He'll make the save when he's supposed to. Lets in a soft one here or there, which is a little bit heartbreaking at times and can be backbreaking. But for Murray, it's just, make that first save tomorrow night, Tuesday night against the Penguins. Try and get in the game, feel the puck again. And I'll be looking to see how his quickness is, his mobility going side to side, one-timers. Penguins love to move the puck, so he knows that better than anyone. So we'll see how it turns out. But to me, he's got to get obviously fully healthy, a couple weeks of regular playing time, and give management an idea of what exactly they have in him, because right now they have a good preseason goalie that means absolutely nothing in the regular season.
Yeah, and obviously, you look at Murray's time in Pittsburgh and what he was able to do there, and it's frustrating because that there's potential there, and that there's a ceiling that he can hit in Toronto, and he's still relatively young. I believe he's only 27 or 28 years old. So
younger than you think, for sure. Yeah.
This isn't a guy who he's 35 years old and he's being held together by super glue. This guy has years left in him, I would say. I just think it's a big opportunity for him. I mean, it sounds like a Captain Obvious statement to say, but I'm sure that the Leafs and him, both of them alike, were not thrilled with the way that the season started. The fact that, like you said, he had that great preseason and he starts his first game of the season was rough, but it's the first game of the season. What are you going to do? I think there was a great opportunity for him to rebound on that Saturday against the Senators, and he didn't get a chance to do that. So, coming back into a crease where the guy who had stolen the crease from him in the month of October and Samsonov is now injured as well. I mean, there's a big opportunity for him. He doesn't have to really worry about, playing his heart out to get playing time again, because in the end, they're not going to, unless one goalie is catastrophic and the other one is stardom. I mean, I can't imagine the Leafs are going to really start giving Källgren starts over Murray on a regular basis. So I think just the big thing tomorrow is for him to, like you said, just keep an eye on his mobility and his quickness and how he can go from post to post. Also wouldn't hurt them to get a bunch of zip ties and just like stick his glove hand up to the top right corner of the net. It's like, come on, it's just, you know where to put the glove, you know where your weakness is. Come on, man.
When's the last time the Leafs had a goalie that had a good glove?
Samsonov's looks all right so far.
He looks all right, but
sample, but
you can go back to Freddie, you can go back Jack, like Campbell wasn't that great. Reimer looked like he was using a phone book. So like, I don't know. It just seems like it's been a while since they've had a goal. Like none of these guys played baseball growing up. Like I don't get it. But yeah, I know he's got. It's gonna be fun to watch and see how he does against his old team.
Yeah, and obviously, you look at the way that Peter Mrazek's season started last year, and I think that Murray and Mrazek's seasons were both strikingly similar, except Peter Mrazek didn't even make it through his first game, which was a tough look on its own. But if you remember last year, Mrazek, was out for a couple of weeks, and then the Leafs brought him back in against Detroit for that one game, and then all of a sudden he was back on the IR again, and Campbell had to take the net for the entire month of November, right into the COVID pause. So I can't imagine the Leafs are risking another situation like that with Murray. If he's starting tomorrow, I'd have to imagine he's starting because he's ready to go. So that makes me feel a little better about it. And it's just a matter of seeing if his durability can hold up or if it's going to get in the way. So moving on, there was also some kind of big news today from practice. And Kyle Dubas spoke to the media, which, he only does a couple times a year. So you knew this was kind of a big deal. Jake Muzzin is going to be out until late February with, I don't want to screw up the medical term, but I know that he is going to be out with, I think it's a cervical injury, and it'll be, it's a spine. And that's obviously, that's something that you don't play around with, in my opinion. You saw the way that he went down after that hit against Arizona. It's just for Muzzin, it looks like a situation where he's got to be prioritizing his long-term health. Kyle Dubas obviously shed light on this as well. He said it's not something you really want to mess around with. So unless he's 100% sure that this recovery time is going to allow that to settle and not be an issue, we have to do what's right for his long-term health. And obviously he was asked, are they expecting Muzzin to play again this year? And Dubas says it's hard to predict. So, I mean, I think they're leaving the possibility open just as maybe as motivation for Muzzin to, keep working along in his recovery and not have to sit there basking in the fact that he might have just played his last NHL game. But at the same time, you don't screw around with an injury like that, like Dubas said. So, what do you see with the hole that Jake Muzzin's leaving on the back end and now for another couple of months? And what do you think the Leafs should do in the meantime to replace that?
Yeah, tough news for sure. Sounds like Muzzin's gonna check back with the doctors in February, I believe, just to see how he's doing. Slight chance he comes back, but all signs are pointing to being out for the year. Dubas was quick to kind of, squash any trade rumors or trade chatter of late. He was, gave a lot of praise to Sandin and Liljegren and said those guys are going to get much bigger opportunities. So expect them to see some major minutes. I love that they're playing together by the looks of it today. So, they're best friends on the team. So why not throw them together? And who knows, maybe they can make a pairing that stays in Toronto for the next 10 years. That's kind of the goal, right? With a couple of first round picks, but Ben will get more of a look. He plays a little bit like same style as Muzzin. So, I mean, it's not going to replace him exactly, but he looks like he's got potential there. So I think they gave him a run. I don't think he'll make a knee-jerk reaction just to make a trade, even with Brody going out for a couple of weeks. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of options when it comes to cheap defensemen, like someone like Josh Brown from Arizona. There's Luke Shen from Vancouver. There's a couple guys that are making under $1 million that would be a little bit easier for the Maple Leafs to handle cap wise. So I think he's going to stand pat for now. They always say that American Thanksgiving is always the threshold of where you see your team, and you'll see more trades happening between then and Christmas. But for me, I don't think the Leafs make a move unless, one of Ben or Liljegren or Sandin, whoever, Hall or Giordano or Riley, one of those guys go out. Then I think, instead of inserting Victor Mete for a month, they're going to think about making a move, and they have the prospects and the capital to do it. They have some high end, prospects, but they also have a lot of mid-level guys that, are going to appeal to other teams. So for me, stand pat for now. Let's see how it plays out. Let's see how Liljegren and Sandin step up. See how Ben, see how he does in a couple more games under his belt. But I don't expect a deal probably till the 14th. I would say by December 1st, have a pretty good sense of what Dubas is thinking.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Jordy Ben, how can you not just absolutely love every single piece of that goal that he scored, the game
Awesome.
winner against Vancouver? When the Leafs scored the 2 goals to tie it up, on both of those goals, I was completely apathetic because I had such a sour taste in my mouth after that first period. I thought that they were going to repeat their effort from the night before and go 0 for 2 with Borje Salming in the building.
Yeah.
And so, I was kind of upset about it. And then obviously Ben, I don't know how he ended up where he was at the front of the net. I mean, I actually didn't know who scored that goal until they did the close up on his face. And I actually jumped up and yelled when I saw Ben's face. And, it's just so funny because when you consider the fact that had Ben not picked the puck up right there, that leaves Morgan Rielly as the only defenseman back on a potential 2-on-1. And with Rielly and Ben out there, I think there's one defenseman you'd rather have there than Morgan Rielly. And so it was just, it was a very wonky situation, but it was a hilarious goal, and I loved it. But yeah, obviously with Jake Muzzin, I think, like everybody's been saying, his long-term health is priority number one. He's got a wife and 2 daughters, and you don't want to sacrifice your well-being for the rest of your life with them, for the purpose of one more season with the Leafs. Like, it's, he's showed up, he's paid his dues with this team. He's been a rock on this defensive core for years now. I like the fact that you brought up the Sandy and Liljegren pairing, because I really do think that there is some potential there. I think that Liljegren, ever since he's come back, he's looked very strong defensively.
Awesome.
He's had a couple of, minor brain gaffes and stupid giveaways, but they're like, every defenseman has those. Like, at this point, you're splitting hairs when you're criticizing things like that. But I think overall Liljegren's looked really good. And I think that there could definitely be a little more maturity on that pairing than we might have seen last season or the year before. But overall, there's a big opportunity for him, for both of them coming up over the next couple of months. And I think even regardless, I know that Dubas is saying that he's not going to, make a move if the D-core looks like they can handle themselves without Muzzin and those guys in their increased roles. But realistically, you got to bring in somebody to kind of bring the style that Jake Muzzin brought, I think, down the line. And maybe that's not a move that happens until the deadline or closer to the deadline, but I don't think that this is going to be the defensive core we see for the rest of the season, regardless of how well Liljegren and Sandin do. All right, before we get to our last couple of topics here, this show is brought to you by Sports Fan Side Hustle, a new digital course that teaches passionate sports fans how to make a lucrative side income off of their love of the game. Get off the sidelines and into the game with a course that will teach you more than 14 different and easy to start methods any sports fan can use to make a steady part-time or full-time income. All you need is the internet, a computer, a passion for sports, and God knows we've got that, and a couple hours a week. So go to sportsidehustle.com to get the absolutely free startup guide that will explain 4 keys to unlocking this income opportunity. Again, that is sports with an S on the end, sportsidehustle.com, and get started today. So before we stray too far away from the comments on Kyle Dubas's comments from today at practice, I do want to bring up some of the other things that he said. And, we kind of touched on this with the potential of there being a trade to be made, but I do want to look at some more of the things that he said here. So one quote that he had was, obviously, the goaltending depth and the defense depth have been tested here. The goaltending one severely. That's a bit of a Captain Obvious statement. We don't really have to sit and dwell on that. But this quote specifically right here, or these 2 quotes, I should say. First one, he says, "This might sound strange, but here's his take on Maple Leafs injuries and poor stretches of play." He says, "It's a very positive thing. You learn a lot about the people that you're with day in and day out. You learn who can handle it and who may not be able to." And then he was asked about Sheldon Keefe, and he was, quote, "very encouraged by Keefe's coaching this season." He says, "There's never anything about him that isn't purposeful. The group is still responsive to him very much so and are willing to play for him when things aren't going necessarily well." Shane, obviously, big talking point over the first couple weeks of the season was, Sheldon Keefe lost the room. Marner's controlling the lineups in there. There was some talk about that. The media took that and ran with it. What do you make of Dubas' comments about Sheldon Keefe and his job security, and also about the adversity the team faces and his quote on people may or may not being able to handle it?
Yeah, I mean, you want to get to know somebody, just see what they're like when their back's up against the wall with a little bit of adversity, and true colors normally shine. So I wasn't surprised to really hear either of the comments, to be honest. I think Dubas is like all in with this group. He knows that this may be his last dance, and I'm not surprised that he's backing Sheldon Keefe. That's his guy. Those guys have been rolling together for close to a decade, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So it's great to hear, because obviously you don't want them to lose the room, and we want as much success as possible. So of course, early on this season, the media tries to turn it and swing things a certain way just to, get some more clicks and go a little bit crazy with that kind of stuff. But I never thought for 1 second that Sheldon Keefe's job was in jeopardy. I can't say I agree with all of his line juggling that goes on and has gone on this year, but for me, as long as he's doing things like Dubas said, purposefully and with with that end goal in mind, I think he's the right guy for the job. His record's pretty sick. Like I think he's 200 games deep now, and he's got one of the best winning percentages in history. So I'm not surprised at all by Dubas's comments. I think he's riding with him. He's, that's his guy. He's not going to fire him this year. I don't care how much they lose. I really don't see that happening at all. So to see what he did on Saturday night, like starting all 6 Swedes like that. I mean, Chalgren was starting regardless, but he chose to start those other 5 guys. And when you do things like that, it really has an impact on the people side of things, the human side of sports that a lot of people forget, especially in Toronto media. So classy move. I think he's a great coach for this group. And for me, it's awesome to hear that the GM has his back and he thinks he still has the room under control and the players are responding. So that's a really good sign for Leafs Nation, because they're going to be able to play their way, out of that early slump. And we've all seen what they do in November. So let's just enjoy these next couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned what he did with the 6 Swedes starting the game, because like you said, that's something that resonates with your players. And, it may not seem like much to the fans watching and the ones who just, they're sitting on their couches just wanting to see their team win a hockey game. But like, obviously that's a big thing for the players in that dressing room. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't shocked to hear the comments either. Sheldon Keefe, you can say what you want about him, but when you have such a high winning percentage this early in your career, it has to mean something. And, you can say, he's been given a team with all this talent. Like, I could coach that team to the winning percentage. And the short answer there is no, you couldn't. Like, come on. But overall, I think that it's good to see that Keefe isn't the guy getting blamed, because, like you said, as much as we've complained about certain roster decisions and the constant line juggling and all that, there's really not much over the past couple of games that I would say Keefe is directly fault for. I've said it before and I'll say it again, if the Leafs, and I don't even want to be having this conversation right now, but, for the, heading into another year when just winning a round would I think do wonders for this team and the media, and just kind of settle down the masses a little bit. I think the players have to be held accountable before anybody else, because they're the ones that have been here every single year. Their coaches and their GMs have shown faith in them and said, listen, we trust you guys to get the job done. And so I don't think that's the right move to ever fire a coach, and there's no less the second coach that they've had in this era. And, all the GM as well. I mean, he's like Dubas, for all people, or for all the complaints you can have about him, he's made some bad moves, and there's no question about that. But every time the Leafs have needed something, he's addressed it and he's gone out and got it. He's gotten grit before, he's gotten defense, and the players in the end have been the ones that haven't been able to put it together in the end. So I wasn't shocked by those comments, and it'll be interesting to see, obviously how Keefe's habits keep up over the next couple of months. And, maybe we'll see if this is a talking point that keeps up or if it gets put to bed at the end. One last topic for this episode. It feels like we can't move on from this episode without talking about Borje Salming coming back to Toronto. Obviously a heartbreaking story from his end over the past couple of years. You know, he was diagnosed with ALS last year, and as of a couple of weeks ago, it's been reduced to a point where he can't speak anymore. First of all, that standing ovation he got before the game against Pittsburgh when Daryl Sittler was holding his hand up to wave at the crowd, and you know, he was in tears, and you saw William Nylander in tears on the bench too. Like, it was just one of those, I don't think I've ever seen something so raw and so emotional from a Leafs game before. And that's obviously coming from somebody who's young like I am, and I haven't been, you know, I've only been watching the Leafs since 2005 or so. So maybe there's not as much of a crop to pick from, but it was just amazing to see. And I don't know if you saw the video, but you know how the Leafs like to do those things where they have their fans kind of dance in the gate entrances and they have the cutouts of the Leaf legends' faces. Did you see the video of Sittler and Salming with their own faces on and pulling it off?
Yeah.
That was one of the best videos I've ever seen. So I guess, yeah, Shane, just what did you make of Borje's return to Toronto and just what he means to the Leafs organization?
Yeah, it's funny. I play hockey Friday nights, and I was on my way to my buddy's house to watch the game before we play, because we don't play till late, like 10:30. So we're gonna watch the game together, and I scroll in. I thought I was gonna be late. I didn't realize there was a ceremony before the game, and when I came downstairs, my buddy was in tears. He was sitting there crying by himself, and I had no idea what was going on. So he rewound it, and we watched it together again, and it was just touching moment. It's you know, the Leafs fans and Leafs, like, hockey world in general, kind of make fun of the passion that really instills with the Leafs, but that was like, you know, passion 101 there. It was very touching. It was great that he got to come over to Toronto and really, you know, get that recognition and hear the ovation. And you know what? It was just one of the best moments ever, really, as far as the organization goes. And I'm really happy that he got that moment, and he was, you know, he's still able to enjoy it as much as possible. Because unfortunately, with that disease, I've had some people in my life affected by that, and it's horrible. So it's cool to see, and I'm really happy they did that. And to, you know, circle back the next night and give him his complete own spotlight, and, you know, even calling up Ekman Larson and Nylander to take the face off, like, just the little things like that that go a long way. I love it from the Leafs. And it's crazy the connection that Toronto, like the Maple Leafs, have with Sweden. Like, you know, Sundin, Salming, the 5 or 6 Swedes on the team now. Like, it just always seems like there's been that connection, and it all started with him. So he's a trailblazer. A lot of those Europeans can, you know, have him to thank for even having the opportunity to go over to the best league in the world. So for me, it's something that I'll never forget, and I hope the same for him and his family.
Yeah, it was just beautiful all around, and a big shout out to Mike Ross, the Leafs PA announcer, because he captured that moment absolutely perfectly. I don't think, you know, I think being an announcer is one thing, but you could tell that he really understood what that moment meant to not just Salming and not just the Leafs, but the fans in the building and everybody alike. And for him to say, "Welcome home, Borje, Leafs Nation loves you." Like, I think that wasn't just reading off a script. That was from the bottom of his heart. Like, listen, like, you got to see how much you're loved and appreciated here. So it was amazing to see. And, you know, I was getting emotional watching it, and Borje Salming retired, I want to say, like 10 years before I was born, something like that. So I never got to watch him when I was young and starting to watch hockey. So it affected me. And, you know, I hope that the Leafs channel that for the rest of the season and play their hearts out for Borje, because, you know, what would he have done if he was on this team right now, right? Like, you know, the style of player he is. Everybody talks about how he was the, you know, not only one of the first Europeans to come over, but he was one of the first Europeans to bring that combination of skill and grit. Like, he was, I think, the polar definition of a warrior. And it's just, I think that's something that the Leafs can really look at and say, you know what, in a world full of, I don't know, Alexander Daigs, be a Borje Salming, right? I was the first player. I was the first player to come to mind. I don't know, maybe.
I know. Yeah, that was a reach. And two, I like how Keefe talked about before the game, just his legacy. Like that word was brought up numerous times, and just kind of kept like keeping in mind to the players, like, listen, you guys got a chance to make a drastic impact on a lot of people's lives for a long time. And those guys like Matthews and Marner and even Tavares, like Nylander, Riley, those guys have a chance to be lifetime Leafs. So seeing a guy like that and how much, he impacted the fans and the city and the country, it's just like Matthew said, it really puts things into perspective pretty quick. And I hope, those guys can really see that they have a chance to be something special in the city, and they haven't even won a playoff round yet. So, let's hope they can, turn that into a little bit of success, extra motivation this year. And yeah, I'm really happy they put that on for them.
Well, that about does it for this week's edition of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Thank you all for tuning in. For Shane Seney, I'm Alex Hobson. We will chat with you next week on the Lounge.